I think the most exciting thing right now is launch. We're currently busy getting services up and running. We're launched already. There are two operators, Maxis and ourselves, Celcom as the other, with services in the market. And we actually think it's going to be a pretty exciting introduction. Much more exciting than even 3G was, for a couple of major reasons. One, I think we see the examples of other markets, Korea, the US, where fairly aggressive rollouts and a receptive customer base has seen very good uptake. Also, well, the handsets are there, which is a big difference from the early days of 3G. So for example, on our network today, we already have 40,000 iPhone users, iPhone 5 users. We have quite a number of Nokia Lumias, and we really think that when the Samsung S4 comes out LTE, which we should launch in the next couple of weeks or so, that's also going to be another major sort of driver for adoption in Malaysia. These things come with challenges. I think a couple of things that come to mind. Firstly is harmonizing LTE when you've got HSPA, 3G, 2G. Like all companies, you've got to look at your capital investments and try and work out, what's the right thing to put where, which parts of the market are best served by retaining a 3G HSPA focus, which areas actually need an LTE service as well. And so I guess that we've resolved that a little bit by focusing on what we call the nomadic customer, as opposed to the sort of, stationary, super sit down and play sort of customer. Very different from 3G again. I think in 3G we discovered that the early adopter was dongle, at least in Malaysia, and that's what drove 3G uptake in Malaysia. But I think now we definitely see that it's smartphones and tablets in particular that will make the difference. And so what we're sort of looking at is sort of using HSPA for a sort of consistent layer of service, and we run it at 42 meg already in KL. And then having LTE in the key sort of locations where people are doing stuff, very much around social interaction, I think, is how we sort of look where we think LTE is best deployed. The second challenge is probably going to be around harmonizing all the sort of little back-end things you need to deliver LTE. So one is the radio network, the other is sort of backhaul and all the service nodes. Backhaul, I think, is a well talked about problem. We need to get the fiber there. In the early days, I think we'll be fine focusing a little bit on microwave, but both the Malaysian regulator and also our view is that you're not really going to deliver the promise of LTE without fiber. And Malaysia is a decent market for fiber, but there probably isn't the fiber density that you get in a Korea or the US with fiber at every street corner, I think. So that's going to take a bit of time to roll out. The second one that we think is important is to create a sort of integrated core. Rather than having a 2G core, 3G core, EPC, rather than having different PCRS all over the place, we think that seeing as customers are likely to be multi-layer going forward, you need to harmonize everything into a single core and around a single PCRF and a single set of service nodes as well. That's taken, it always sounds easy, but actually that's a fair feat of engineering to try and retrofit sort of a single core while you're running multiple services as well. But that's on track, and we expect that to be pretty much live soon. And I think what that will mean is that LTE will be embedded in everything that we sell, rather than having to sell an LTE service on top of the traditional 3G service as well. Yeah. I think we definitely believe that VoLTE will happen. VoIP is happening, so I think VoLTE has to happen. The challenge in a country like Malaysia, though, is probably more a question of timing. People walk around a lot. Mobility is really critical in a country like Malaysia and a city like Kuala Lumpur. So we think that the first focus is to get circuit switch fallback working really well and to make sure that that's a seamless exercise. That's not as seamless in a multi-technology environment, unfortunately, as you might hope. So I think you've got to work on the experience there. But actually, we think it's now working extremely well. For VoLTE to compete with circuit switch, it's going to require a pretty dense LTE network, and that's probably 2 or 3 years away in Kuala Lumpur. Essentially, because you don't want people on VoLTE switching down circuit switch, switching back up to VoLTE, switching back down again. I think a data packet can be managed, by going to HS and LTE. People would be okay with that, and some of that will happen invisibly as well. But a voice call probably introduces a lot of QoS issues, and we don't want to do VoLTE till we feel that the layer is there for a fairly seamless handover. in a similar way that we've traditionally architected voice as well. Well, I think jury's out. We're still thinking whether there's it's join. I think we're fairly believing that some sort of services around RCS are IMS or whatever are critical. The question is, do you take the joint initiative or do you look for much richer and deeper partnerships with OTT players? I think the ideal answer right now is we'll try and do both. But we're still at a relatively early stage of trying to work out which path are we going to put more of our eggs into the right basket as well, right? So ask me maybe in 6 months, we might have a better idea. Yeah. I think it's too early from a operations perspective. I think what we do is make sure that we are ready for it, and I think that's coming down to perhaps making sure you have the right spectrum, your spectrum bands are in the right zones, your carrier aggregations can get to 30, 40 megahertz of spectrum. So I think that's the current focus. We probably will see LTE Advanced appear sometime, we believe, past year 5 from today, somewhere in KL. But I think what's more important right now is to make sure that the fiber is there and the spectrum is there, and we sort of work on being prepared for when we're ready to roll that out. I think it's a very important show. The industry is really at a real inflection point, I think, with LTE. And what's important is, unlike the usual sort of conferences around new things, if I think back to all those IMS conferences that we went to about 10 years ago, this one seems to have real momentum. It seems to have real excitement, and there's real services out there. So I think that rather than having very speculative discussions with people about things you could do, it's also a very pragmatic show, I believe, because we can sit across the table from people, we can shake their hands, and we can actually go away and implement something in our networks on LTE. And I think that's a very, very big difference for me, and one of the major reasons why I'm here at the show.